Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here. And Fallout 4 presents players with quite a grim outlook on life in general. Mankind developed advanced civilizations and became this dominant species, only to nearly destroy itself and the world along with it amidst petty bickering. Now in the aftermath of near total nuclear annihilation, what little remains of humanity squabbles amongst the ashes. The universe of Fallout 4 is certainly a bleak one, to say the least. And the wastes of the Boston Commonwealth we get a chance to visit in Fallout 4 don't hesitate to show us such a reality. The game is littered with a number of subtle, yet otherwise depressing scenes, locations, and encounters that can really tug on our heartstrings. However, despite Fallout 4 being out for nearly 3 years now, due to its sheer size and complexity, much of those moments may yet remain hidden or unknown to many of us. So today we'll be taking a look at just a few of those, as we dive into 5 tragic tales you may have missed in Fallout 4. Starting off, we have the upsetting tale behind the men inhabiting the Libertalia. The Libertalia is a large raider encampment, made up of destroyed ships and watercraft south of the Nahant Wharf. And at first, the raiders here seem to be just as evil and cruel as any other gang. If not, perhaps even more so. The player can find piles of corpses belonging to simple settlers and traders, on top of numerous bodies in cages and other disgusting positions. Clearly the men living here are bad guys. Well, what you may find pretty unsettling is that these bandits were once a part of a very familiar organization with quite a different set of objectives. You see, towards the top of the largest sunken vessel at the Libertalia, we'll encounter Wire. At first, he seems like any other raider here. He has no unique dialogue, and will attack on sight. The only special thing about him seems to be his name. Nearby will be his terminal, which contains a number of journal entries dating back all the way to 5 years ago in 2282 to 2283. And in them, Wire narrates the upsetting story behind this raider gang that he's apparently the leader of. In his first entry, he describes his posse's arrival to this location, clearing out the mirelurks and ghouls so that his group may set up shop in this ship graveyard. But then drops a bit of a bomb. He reveals that he and his men are all Minutemen. Well, at least, sort of. Apparently at the time this terminal entry was written, which again was 5 years ago, the Minutemen's leader, a man named General Becker, had just died. Wire states that the organization and its militias had begun to turn on each other in the aftermath, so he and his men simply left to do their own thing, ultimately finding themselves here. As the entries continue over the next few months, Wire talks about the group's struggles. They make an honest living by protecting merchant caravans and scavenging for supplies. It becomes clear they're not really Minutemen anymore, but by Commonwealth standards, they're still certainly upstanding citizens. Though their integrity comes with a price. Their way of life is difficult. Early entries mention food shortages being a common problem, and they're constantly getting ripped off by the very merchants that they're being paid to protect. Their lives certainly aren't easy. And while Wire attempts to remain honorable and keep his men full of that integrity, at one point going so far as to hang 2 of his best soldiers for attacking a caravan, he continuously emphasizes just how miserable their life has become due to these struggles. Eventually, however, in one entry about 6 months into the terminal, he finally snaps. Wire states that his men were stiffed yet again by a group of traders, and on the brink of starvation, he's realized that playing by the rules isn't gonna keep his men fed. Merchants at Bunker Hill mocked him to his face when he came begging for help. Wire ends this entry by ominously stating that he and his men aren't gonna put up with this. He's going to make an example. It's not until a couple of months later that we see Wire entered his next and final entry. By now, it is May of 2283. 4 years ago. And in this entry, it seems obvious that Wire and his men have succumbed to the full-on raider lifestyle. That's what they call themselves now. Not Minutemen, Raiders. But they're finally making a good living. They eat well and are extraordinarily wealthy in caps. Though the immorality of their new way of life hasn't been totally lost on them. Here's how Wire concludes his last entry. This is the best shape we've been in since leaving the Minutemen. General Becker would be sick if he saw us now, but he's dead and we're alive. I don't feel like writing anymore. The raider gang of the Libertalia didn't start off as inherently evil. They were in fact once good, arguably heroic and noble Minutemen. But hunger and betrayal have a tendency to change people, and even men as pure as these were not immune to such effects. It's a sad story, but as a wise man once said, you either die the hero, or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Next on our list is the depressing history of Ranger Cabin. Ranger Cabin is a small, cabin southeast of Sanctuary. When the player first arrives, it'll initially seem pretty insignificant, though we'll have a handful of unwelcoming bloatfly inhabitants. Once inside the structure, you'll find a skeleton sleeping on a mat. Well, not really sleeping, but you get the idea. Next to a suitcase. At first, this also seems somewhat mundane, at least by post-apocalyptic standards. Skeletons are pretty normal in Fallout. However, this whole scene is anything but tragic. Should you loot the suitcase, you'll find a holotape titled Runaway's Journal. It was recorded by the person these remains belonged to right before the bombs fell, who had evidently just been kicked out of her home after informing her parents she was pregnant. Take a listen.
October 22nd, 2077. I finally told them tonight, and it was bad. Real bad. Dad was shouting, telling me I should be ashamed, that I had to get out of the house. Mom just cried, and somehow that hurt worse than anything else. She didn't say a word, not even when I packed my things. I can't go to John. He doesn't even know yet. Maybe he'll never know. If it weren't for the cabin, I wouldn't have a place to sleep. Just need some time to think. Last time I was here, I was just a little girl playing clubhouse in this old cabin. Now I'm really scared. Will anything ever be right again?
Of course, this poor girl was never given the chance to reconcile with her family, inform the father, nor even have the child. All casualties of a war none of these people wanted. Coming in at number 3, we delve into the nauseating narrative of Wayne Gorski. Should the player head over to the Gorski cabin, a location south of Concord, you'll find what remains of yet another pre-war cabin, with a number of feral ghouls guarding the premises. Once inside, you'll be greeted by yet another feral ghoul. However, you'll also notice that on the home's floor will be a curious-looking hatch leading to a root cellar. Enter it, and you'll find yourself in a crude underground bunker. Specifically, a large, seemingly unfinished room, with a couple of shelves and boxes connected to a makeshift dugout hallway of sorts. The path leads to a blue door that, when opened, will release a unique feral ghoul named Wayne Gorski, who won't be particularly friendly to the sole survivor. Once you've taken care of him, you'll notice that the room he's emerging from is far better furnished than any other in the underground structure, and it will quickly become obvious that he was working on something rather nefarious. On his workbench will be a mini-nuke detonator, a mini-nuke hemisphere core, 2 micronuclear beryllium caps, and a stabilizer fin. This man was building a bomb. Thankfully, we need not look too far in order to uncover Wayne's motivations and intentions, as in one of the corners of his room will be a terminal, which ironically sits on a stand next to a bottle cap mine. The computer will have but one entry written by Wayne, clearly before the bombs fell. In it, he states his belief that the United States government has been infecting its citizens with a variety of mind control devices, and evidently Wayne seems to think that a recently erected electrical tower near his front lawn is one such object. He pledges to take down the tower with an incendiary device he says he's begun construction on, and vows not to stand idly by. This man was clearly a maniac. To be fair, the US government in the world of Fallout certainly wasn't the most benevolent force in existence. Though the bigger bombs clearly came before Wayne could finish his, and if you look outside of his home, you'll find the very electrical tower he intended to destroy, still proudly towering over the ashes 2 centuries later. So, Electrical Tower 1, Wayne Gorski, 0. Getting close to the end here at number 4, I figured we'd explore a tragedy that's as strange as it is unfortunate. On the beaches south of the wreck of the FMS Northern Star, just west of a nearby lighthouse, lies a small bottle, with a paper note inside of it. Interacting with the item will allow you to read this message in a bottle, which simply says, "I'm screwed." You'll then be given a miscellaneous quest marker directing you to the middle of the ocean in order to track down the author of this little letter. Once you've arrived, dive down onto the ocean floor, and you'll happen upon a strange series of pipes, one of which has an odd hatch door leading inside of it. Open it up, and within the metal tubes, you will find a human skeleton. In its company will be a small first aid kit and a steamer trunk. What do we have here? Who was this person, and how did they get down to a location like this? Clearly, he's the author of our message. Was he a diver trapped down here at the onset of the Great War, and was his note some sort of pessimistic plea for help? Maybe he was some sort of maintenance worker. That would explain the steamer trunk that got caught down here when the bombs fell, and then the place proceeded to flood. No matter, the truth has been lost to the sea. And finally, last on our list, we're not actually headed to a specific location, but instead this sad story has to do with a random encounter. While wandering the wastes of the Commonwealth, it's possible to come upon an NPC simply named Scavenger, standing next to what seems to be a random hatch in the ground. Get too close to the man and he'll turn hostile, saying, "Back off, this is mine, it's been sealed up since the Great War." But if you simply murder him to death and walk up to the door anyway, you'll be prompted with an option that simply reads, "Detonate." Doing so will result in a small explosion occurring from the door. This can be lethal if you're not prepared. Alternatively, you can simply shoot the hatch from a distance, which will safely trigger the explosion anyway. Once the charge has been detonated, when you reapproach the doors, you'll be allowed to enter the hatch, almost as if you blew it open. And when you do, you'll find yourself in a small, abandoned, and frankly insufficiently constructed pre-war fallout shelter. Inside will be a number of supplies you'd expect to be in such a structure. Some bottled water, a small amount of food, a fridge with a weapon in it, and a locker containing some leveled loot. But you won't be in this bunker alone, as sitting on a chair will be what's left of a man's skeleton. Presumably, he who was once the proud owner of this hideaway. On the metal table next to him will lie a cane, empty beer bottle, and pack of gray tortoises that can be taken, suggesting our well-prepared friend was an elderly fellow. Now, this scene is already quite a fascinating one. But what makes it so interesting is that on the wall in front of these remains is a Vault-Tec poster with a knife jammed into the head of the Vault Boy character. Whoever this man was had a clear bone to pick with this company. Maybe he had wanted to get into one of their shelters but was rejected and had to build his own. Or it's possible that he somehow knew of the corporation's evil intentions beforehand. Furthermore, it's unclear what took his life. There seems to be adequate food and water in the building, or at least some still left, so he probably didn't starve, though considering the rather crude design, it's easily possible radiation could be the culprit, or even just his already old age. Whatever put an end to it, it's certainly a tragic tale to imagine. An elderly man forced to bury himself alone in a homemade shelter for God knows how long, knowing he's outlived everyone he's ever cared about. Chances are you're the first company he's gotten in quite some time. But it's with that depressing note we are going to wrap up. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. Do keep in mind it's all just a game. None of this actually happened, thankfully. I don't know, just saying that makes me feel a little bit better. But which of the ones featured on this list struck you the most or hit you the hardest? What tragic tales do you know of that I've yet to cover? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for coming, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.